This story has me in a flurry of mixed emotions. It has to do with police brutality, corruption, just abuse of the system through and through, but also what it really takes, to get police to care about police brutality. So in this case, there was a protest that was happening, and there, as most protests do, they have undercover officers that are, within the protesters. And you had a bunch of police who... Okay, so let me just back up a second. In St. Louis, this is an idea of how corrupt the system is with their police there. There is a list of police officers, I believe it's about 80 names long, it's something around there, where they have lied so much under oath, they've put false evidence so many times that their word in front of a judge is actually nullified. They're not allowed to testify because their word means so little. But they're still employed and on the force, of course. So this is a case where I believe it's 4 officers who, unbeknownst to them, beat up an undercover 22-year veteran and put him in the hospital. And he's recovering, and he has a neck brace, and they've fractured bones. I mean, they really beat him up, and they're like, oh, he was resisting arrest. Of course, he was, as everyone says when they have to cover themselves. Now, what's interesting about this case is if you look at just about any other case of police brutality, police fight tooth and nail to say there's no issue, our officers did exactly what they needed to do. This person who is probably innocent, whatever, he's actually a thug and terrible, and everything that happened to him, he deserved it. In this case, they did it to one of their own. So all these officers that beat him up are facing very severe charges. And it just goes to show that when the police decide to take police brutality seriously, they do. But the bar is so high in America, the police have to beat up themselves for it to be triggered.
It's a sad case because we've covered numerous times on Heartlands Media about police brutality, young innocent people being beaten to death, or either being horribly crippled, losing their livelihoods because the police decide to mistakenly identify an individual because they looked a certain way. And most of the time, these corrupt officers get away with it, and it's a sad state of affairs. I mean, that's why people are screaming on top of the mountain for police reform, some form of civilian oversight, because for a long time, I have to think, how many stories have we covered in regards for people actually holding police accountable for crimes that they've committed against the community?
It's so rare. I mean, we had Laquan McDonald recently, which was like one case, but it's like the conviction rate for police that have committed violence is less than people who rape women.
There's also another story too that's just coming to mind. When we last summer or the summer before, we covered an incident where 15 people were exonerated for crimes that they didn't commit because there was a squad of cops here in the city of Chicago that were putting false evidence on them, false charges, and threatening them that if you don't tell us where these individuals are at, we're going to send you to jail.
Wasn't it? For some of them, it wasn't even that. It was, if you don't come up with $15,000, these charges are going to stick. If you make it for a spell, they'll just go away.
An interesting thing too, when we did the Facebook live stream of that event, somebody commented that, hey, they did this to my cousin, and they threatened him with if he didn't pay them $12,000 or something like that.
Now here's
he would face the same kind of jail time too.
Here's the important thing as far as I look at it. You hear this? I hear this. I don't know why they use this terminology, but police officers, or the chiefs, when they talk about this, they'll always say, we have a few bad apples, but they never finish the phrase. It's not, there's a few bad apples, period. It's a few bad apples spoil the bunch. Now, here's the issue I have that I'm always constantly dealing with, how to try and think about it. What's the right way to look at this? What's the right way for it to make sense? And that is, there are good police, and I think that's obvious. I think that if I say that, no one's, I think maybe a few people might disagree, but everyone's like, well, yeah, duh, of course. And then a lot of people probably say, well, it's definitely the majority. My issue is this. If you have a few bad apples that are sitting there to the phrase, They spoil it because if you have, like there was a thing we covered recently about how a woman was testifying that a detective was falsifying a report with Laquan McDonald. We have that on our Facebook page. Now, what's really terrible about this is if a good officer says nothing when they see a bad officer act, can they be considered a good officer? Or are they now just complicit? It's a good question. I think it's a fair one on either side. I think there's very good arguments on both sides. But the U.S. police has to stop acting like a feudal militia. Yeah. They have to start acting like responsible organizations. Police need to be professional. They need to be accountable. And they can't just go off and beat people up.